The 10 Lost Tribes of Israel, Part 1. Does God have a plan for the Israel of the Bible in the last days? The Christian world is currently very concerned with this question. The Jews are returning to their land, it is said, and they expect the Messiah's coming in the near future. The Ark of the Covenant is being searched for, and from some quarters it is reported that it has been found. The foundation stone is ready for the construction of the third temple, and a new era of glory for the Jews is imminent, it is said in the Christian world. Let us make an attempt to clear up some misunderstandings in connection with Israel and the Jews. What is a Jew, and what does the Bible mean by Israel, the house of Jacob, the house of Israel, and the house of Judah? There are obviously many misunderstandings going on here. The beginning. The term Jew is greatly misunderstood. Most people associate Jews with the state of Israel, that is, those who have immigrated there, mainly from the former Soviet Union, the United States and Europe, as well as the various Jewish communities around the world. However, only a minority, approximately 7 million of the total number of Jews in the world, who are approximately 16 to 17 million, have immigrated to Israel to date, and many of these are children of the original immigrants. The concept of Israel requires closer examination, and for the sake of context, a historical retrospective is necessary. Both Jews and Arabs count Abraham as their fleshly ancestors. The Jews through Isaac and the Arabs through Ishmael. Let it be said right away that neither Abraham, Isaac, nor Ishmael were Jews, just as they were not Mohammedans. Nor were Isaac's son Jacob and his 12 sons Jews, as many believe. We have heard expressions such as, quote-unquote, the exodus of the Jews from Egypt, and, quote-unquote, the Jew Moses, and, quote-unquote, the Jew Abraham, etc., etc. This is by definition incorrect and has a simple explanation. In the book of Genesis chapter 10, we find this genealogy, quote, Shem also had children. He was the ancestor of all the children of Eber, and was the eldest brother of Japheth. The sons of Shem were Elam, Ashur, Arpachshad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram were Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad had a son, Shelah, and Shelah had a son, Eber, unquote, from Genesis chapter 10, verses 21 to 24. In other words, Eber was the grandson's son of Shem, i.e., Shem was Eber's great-great-grandfather. From Shem comes the expression Semite, and Eber is the origin of the word Hebrew. We read further, quote, These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old when he became the father of Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. Shem lived after he became the father of Arpachshad 500 years and had sons and daughters. When Arpachshad was 35 years old, he became the father of Salah. After Arpachshad became the father of Salah, he lived 403 years and had sons and daughters. When Salah was 30 years old, he became the father of Eber. After Salah became the father of Eber, he lived 403 years and had sons and daughters. When Eber was 34 years old, he became the father of Peleg. After Eber became the father of Peleg, he lived 430 years and had sons and daughters. When Peleg was 30 years old, he became the father of Reu. After Peleg became the father of Reu, he lived 209 years and had sons and daughters. When Reu was 32 years old, he became the father of Serug. After Reu became the father of Serug, he lived 207 years and became the father of sons and daughters. When Serug was 30 years old, he became the father of Nahor. After Serug became the father of Nahor, he lived 200 years and became the father of sons and daughters. When Nahor was 29 years old, he became the father of Terah. After Nahor became the father of Terah, he lived 119 years and became the father of sons and daughters. When Terah was 70 years old, he became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. This is the account of the descendants of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran became the father of Lot. Unquote, from Genesis chapter 11, verses 10 to 27. And we again quote, And Abraham named his son, whom Sarah bore to him, Isaac, unquote from Genesis chapter 21, verses 2-3. And again we quote from the book of Genesis. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to wife. Afterwards his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, and they called his name Jacob, unquote from Genesis chapter 25, verses 20-26. Jacob was later given a new name. We again quote from Genesis, and he said, Thy name shall no more be called Jacob, but Israel, for thou hast striven with God and with men, and hast prevailed, unquote from Genesis chapter 32, verses 28. In these verses we see that Abraham, that is Abram, had a direct line of descent from Eber back to Shem. Abraham was therefore of the seed of Shem. Because the word Jew is derived from Judah or Judea, because Judah was one of Jacob's 12 sons, it is wrong to use the term Jews for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jew is an expression that first came into use after the Babylonian captivity, when a minority of the house of Judah, i.e. the descendants of Judah and Benjamin, as well as some of the Levites, returned to Jerusalem. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were Hebrews and Semites. The first time the name Israel is mentioned in the Bible is in Genesis chapter 32, verses 28, after Jacob had wrestled with God when Esau came to meet him with 400 men. We quote from the book of Genesis, he said, Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, and have prevailed. Unquote from Genesis chapter 32, verse 28. After this event, Jacob and his family can rightly be called Israelites or Israel, but not Jews. In the Bible, the house of Jacob refers to the 12 tribes, the descendants of Jacob's 12 sons. After Israel was divided in the year 947 BC, the 10 tribes in the northern kingdom with Samaria as its capital were referred to as the house of Israel, while three tribes, that is Judah, Benjamin, and most of Levi in the southern kingdom, with Jerusalem as its capital, were referred to as the house of Judah. We know the story of Joseph in Egypt, of Jacob and his sons who, because of a famine in their own land, come there, as well as the story of Moses and the Exodus from Egypt 400 years later. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, they finally enter the promised land, where the land is divided among the 12 tribes of Israel, the descendants of Jacob's sons. Actually, there were 13 tribes, because the tribe of Joseph is often referred to as Ephraim and Manasseh, who were Joseph's 2 sons. But because the tribe of Levi was not to be counted among those who were to have their inheritance in the land, they were set aside for the priestly service and service in the temple, the Bible counts 12 tribes. If you'd like to know more about the subject of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, you can buy the new book, The Lost 10 Tribes of Israel in Europe by Mikkel S. Krag. That is 352 pages long, and you can buy it on Amazon. The price on Amazon, excluding postage and handling, is $9 for the paperback version and $17 for the hardcover version. You can also get it as a Kindle ebook, and the price is $2. And there's, of course, no postage and handling for the ebook version. The Kingdom of Israel. After Joshua's death, Israel was ruled by judges. Samuel was Israel's last judge. At that time, Israel wanted to be like the idolatrous nations. We quote, But the people refused to listen to Samuel. They said, No, but we will have a king over us, so that we may be like all the other nations. Our king will judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Unquote from the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 8, verses 19 to 20. Around the year 1050 BC, Saul, who was of the tribe of Benjamin, was anointed as the first king of Israel. At that time, Israel was a united kingdom divided into 12 districts, each of which was a division of the 12 tribes. But because Saul later fell away from the Lord, a new king was chosen, this time from the tribe of Judah. And this was David, the son of Jesse. David had a son, Solomon, who took over the kingdom after his father's death. The kingdom of Israel divided. After Solomon died, the kingdom of Israel was divided into two. The northern kingdom, which was called Israel, with 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, with Samaria as its capital, and the southern kingdom, called the kingdom of Judah, with Judah and Benjamin, and some of the Levites, with Jerusalem as its capital. Each of these two kingdoms elected its own king. From that time on, the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom are referred to in the Bible as the house of Israel or simply Israel, while the 2 tribes of the southern kingdom are referred to as the house of Judah or simply Judah. King Solomon had imposed heavy taxes on the people, and after his death the people wanted his son, the successor to the throne, Rehoboam, to lighten the taxes which he did not want to do. We quote, "Now when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king and said, 'What portion have we in David? We have no portion in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, now provide for your own house, David.' So Israel returned to their homes. Only the children of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah made Rehoboam king. Then King Rehoboam sent to them Adoram, who was in charge of the forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam himself had to get up in haste and flee to Jerusalem. Thus Israel fell from the house of David, and so it has been to this day." Unquote, from the book of 1 Kings, chapter 12, verses 16 to 19. The division of Israel occurred around the year 931 BC. At that time, Israel had been a united kingdom for 119 years. After the division, Nebat's son Jeroboam of the tribe of Ephraim became king over Israel, also referred to as the house of Israel, the northern kingdom, which were the 10 tribes, while Solomon's son Rehoboam, who was of the tribe of Judah, he became king of the southern kingdom, also referred to as the house of Judah, which was made up of Judah, Benjamin, and most of the Levites. So Israel was now divided into the house of Israel in the north and the house of Judah in the south. The house of Israel is taken into exile. Around the year 732 BC, several tribes in the northern kingdom were taken into exile to Assyria by the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III. This time, Gad, Reuben, half of Manasseh, and probably Naphtali and Zebulun were taken into exile. We quote, "In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon and Abel-Beth-Maachah and Janoah and Kedesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried the inhabitants away to Assyria." Unquote, from the book of 2 Kings, chapter 15, verse 29. We again quote, "Then the God of Israel stirred up against them Pul, king of Assyria, that is Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and carried them away captive, both the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, and he removed them to Hala and to Habor and to Hara and to the river of Gozan, and there they are to this day." Unquote, from the book of 1 Chronicles, chapter 5, verse 26. In the years 732 to 721 BC, the remnant of the 10 tribes of the house of Israel, that is the northern kingdom, were carried away captive to Assyria by the Assyrian king Shalmaneser the fifth, also known as Sargon the Second. We again quote from the Bible, "The king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away captive to Assyria and settled them in Hala and in Habor, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes." Unquote, from the book of 2 Kings, chapter 17, verses 5 to 6, and chapter 18, verses 10 to 11. And we again quote, "Therefore the Lord was very angry with Israel, and removed them from his presence. There was none left but the tribe of Judah." Unquote. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 18. A few inhabitants of Israel nevertheless escaped the Assyrian kings and remained in Israel as remnants of these tribes. For we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 30 that about 5 years later, approximately 726 BC, King Hezekiah of Judah summoned the entire nation, both those remaining in Israel and Judah, to the Passover. Here remnants are mentioned from Ephraim, Manasseh, Zebulun, Issachar, and Asher. We read that in 2 Chronicles chapter 30, verses 1 to 26. The Samaritans. After Israel, or the northern kingdom, was conquered by Assyria and the bulk of the 10 tribes were taken into captivity, both Samaria and Israel became an Assyrian province. The Assyrian king allowed people from Syria, Babylonia, and northern Mesopotamia to settle in Samaria and Israel. These pagans brought their own religion with them, and as a result of intermarriage with the remnant of the people of Israel, these foreign religions were mixed with the religion of Israel. And we quote from the book of 2 Kings. "And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria, and dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was, at the beginning of their dwelling there, that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, The nations which thou hast removed and placed in the cities of Samaria know not the manner of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, Carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there, and let him teach them the manner of the God of the land. Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel, and taught them how they should fear the Lord. Howbeit every nation made gods of their own, and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities wherein they dwelt. And the men of Babylon made Succoth-Benoth, and the men of Cuth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nipas and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burned their children in the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the god of Sepharvaim. So they feared the Lord, and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared the Lord, and served their own gods, after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. Unquote from the book of 2 Kings, chapter 17, verses 24 to 34. Later, under the Assyrian kings Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal, new groups of foreigners were settled in Samaria and Israel with further intermarriage and dilution. Thus, the Samaritans became a separate group, a pagan Jewish mixture, who were considered unclean by the Jews of Jesus' time. See, for example, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. And we again quote from the book of 2 Kings. At that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother and his servants and his princes and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign, and he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold, which Solomon king of Israel had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And he carried away all Jerusalem, and all the princes, and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained, save the poorest sort of the people of the land. And he carried away Jehoiakim to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land. Those carried he into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon. And all the men of might, even 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths 1,000, all that were strong and apt for war, even them the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon. Unquote from the book of 2 Kings, chapter 24, verses 10 to 16. The Jews. The first time we encounter the term Jew in the Norwegian Bible is in the book of Ezra, chapter 4, verse 12. And the reason we mention the Norwegian Bible is because this video is based on an article originally written in Norwegian. So we quote from the book of Ezra, "Be it known unto the king that the Jews which came up from thee to us are come unto Jerusalem, building the rebellious and the bad city, and have set up the walls thereof and joined the foundations." Unquote. This was after the Babylonian captivity. The term Jew also occurs in 2 Kings chapter 25, verse 25, in connection with Judah being taken away to Babylon. In this case, the original text actually says men of Judah. The term Jew is derived from Judah, who was one of Jacob's 12 sons. Therefore, it is not correct to use the term to refer to all of Israel, including all 12 tribes. Jew is used for the descendants of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, those who returned to Judea and Jerusalem after the Babylonian captivity, where only a fraction returned. Consequently, as mentioned, neither Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, nor his 12 sons were Jews in the truest sense of the word. The 10 tribes that were taken to Assyria were not Jews. They were Hebrews and Israelites. The tribe of Judah, from which the term Jew is derived, was not among them. Jewish scriptures, however, claim that a small portion of both Judah, Benjamin, and Levi were among those taken to Assyria, and this is probably correct. While the Israelites were in Egypt, a number of them, including descendants of Judah, immigrated and founded colonies, including on the European Mediterranean coast. This will be the subject of another article. Today's Israel. When Christendom today speaks widely about the Jews returning to the land and Israel being quote-unquote gathered, this is therefore not true. There is evidence that the bulk of today's Jews worldwide, including those who immigrated to Israel, are apparently of non-Semitic origin and therefore do not qualify for the term Jew at all. The rest of the Jews, a minority, are descendants of the Jews of the Bible, that is, of the minority of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, who in the 4th century BC returned to Judea after the Babylonian captivity. Many of these were also diluted by intermarriage with foreigners, as we can see from Ezra chapter 10. However, some pure-blooded Judeans had remained in Israel. They constituted the poorer part of the population that King Nebuchadnezzar left alone. They were later called Galileans, from whom both Jesus and 11 of the apostles descended. We can only say that of all those who are returning to Israel today, only a small fraction are descendants of those who once constituted 1 or 2 tribes of the nation of Israel, i.e. before the division of the kingdom in 931 BC. It is not Israel that is quote-unquote gathered today, it is Jews of non-Semitic origin, as well as a small number of descendants of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Most Jews in Israel today can therefore not count Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as their ancestor. Some believe that as much as 95% of today's Jews are of non-Semitic origin. These are Jews of European origin, i.e. Khazars. This is documented by, among others, Arthur Koestler in his book The 13th Tribe, and a number of other works, including Benjamin Friedman in the book Facts Are Facts, and Jack Bernstein in The Life of an American Jew. All of these people mentioned were Jews themselves. In the Middle Ages, the Khazar Empire was a large flourishing nation north of the Black Sea, including what is today Ukraine. In the 7th century AD, the Khazar king Bulon decided that his people should adopt the Jewish religion. In a letter written by the Khazar king Joseph to Rabbi Hasdai in response to an inquiry from the latter, circa 960 AD, Joseph mentions that the Khazars are descended from Noah's son Japheth through Togarmah. This is documented in the book The Jew in the Medieval World by Jacob R. Marcus, pages 227 to 232. When the Khazar Empire was conquered by the Russians in the 11th century AD, large numbers of Khazar Jews immigrated westward to what is now Eastern Europe. This explains quite simply why there is such a large concentration of Jews precisely in these areas. The 10 lost tribes. What happened to the 10 tribes that were taken captive to Assyria in the years 732 to 721 BC? One theory is that they were assimilated through marriage into the Assyrian Empire and disappeared in that way. Another theory is that the 10 tribes migrated northwest, and that the Christian Western world is the descendants of these 10 tribes. It is unlikely that God would allow the descendants of these 10 tribes, the seed of Abraham, to disappear from history without a trace. We must not forget that God made an eternal, unconditional covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God will keep this covenant, literally. The prophets of the Bible, from Isaiah to Malachi, indicate in a number of places that God will fulfill this covenant with the house of Israel in the last days. It is all too easy to simply transfer this to spiritual Israel, as some do. This is where most Christians head into a dead end, because they do not understand what the Bible means by Israel and Jews. The house of Israel did not refer to the Jews, but to the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom who were taken captive to Assyria. The promises to Israel, therefore, do not apply only to the Jews by blood, but to a united Israel, that is, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. But where is the house of Israel? There is much evidence that the descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel, the so-called house of Israel, may be in the Christian Western nations. They have been hidden for 2,700 years, but will reappear in the end times in connection with the 144,000 in Revelation chapter 7. It is explicitly stated that these 144,000 are 12,000 sealed from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, mentioned by name. Are they referring to the descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel reunited with the descendants of the house of Judah? Or is it spiritual Israel with the characteristics of the 12 tribes of Israel? This latter is one common interpretation adopted by many, but is it biblically sound? Here are some of the references to the house of Israel in the last days. Quote from the book of Isaiah. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and its rest shall be glorious. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Unquote from Isaiah chapter 11, verses 9 to 12. And we quote from the book of Jeremiah. And I will be found of you, saith the Lord, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith the Lord, and I will bring you again into the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive. Unquote from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 29, verse 14. And we quote from the book of Ezekiel, and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side and bring them into their own land. Unquote. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 21. And we quote from the book of Micah, the minor prophet. I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Bosra, as the flock in the midst of their fold. They shall make a great noise by the reason of the multitude of men. Unquote. Micah chapter 2, verse 12. And again from the book of Ezekiel. For I will take you from among the heathen, and gather you out of all countries, and will bring you into your own land. And ye shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your God. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 24 and verse 28. This is just a small selection. Note the words in Ezekiel chapter 37, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they begun. Ezekiel wrote those words about 200 years after the house of Israel was taken captive to Assyria, and should probably be pure words for the money. It also says that Israel will be gathered from the peoples, and that they will return to, quote unquote, their own land. That meaning the land that God gave to their fathers, meaning Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel. It is difficult to transfer this to some kind of spiritual Israel. So why did Ezekiel write these words 200 years after the house of Israel was taken captive? Why bother with them anymore when they were rejected? We must also not forget that the house of Israel, i.e. 10 of the 12 tribes, did not reject Jesus. They were not even there when Jesus was crucified. They had been taken captive 700 years earlier. The 70 weeks that were allotted to your people, i.e. Daniel's people. Daniel was of the tribe of Judah. We read that in Daniel chapter 1 verse 6. So these 70 weeks did not apply to the house of Israel, but to the remnant of Judah and Benjamin, that is the house of Judah. These were Jews by definition, and it was they who pressured the Roman authorities to crucify Jesus. This is a point that many overlook due to the confusion of terms. The house of Israel neither rejected Jesus nor hung him on a cross. On the other hand, the apostles went to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, which is a quote from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 10 verse 6. And these lost sheep of the house of Israel, they were the descendants of the 10 tribes who still, or at least some of them, lived in Asia Minor. The Galatians were a part of them. Many of these accepted Jesus and became Christians. Note the prayer of the prophet Daniel. We quote, O Lord, righteousness belongeth unto thee, but unto us confusion of faces, as at this day. To the men of Judah, and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and unto all Israel, that are near and that are far off, through all the countries whither thou hast driven them, because of their trespass, that they have trespassed against thee. Unquote. Daniel chapter 9, verse 7. Many nations and peoples. In Genesis chapter 28, we find some interesting verses. Isaac blesses his son Jacob and makes this prophecy. We quote, And God Almighty bless thee, and make thee fruitful, and multiply thee, that thou mayest be a multitude of people. Verse 3. And in verse 14, God confirms this blessing. We quote again, And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth, and thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Unquote. And here we are talking about the descendants of Shem, the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel, not the descendants of Japheth and Ham. We again quote from the book of Genesis, Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee, and I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. Unquote. Genesis chapter 17, verses 5 to 6. And again, from Genesis chapter 35, we quote, And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob, thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thy loins." Unquote. Genesis chapter 35, verses 10 to 11. This is plain language. Also note that these were unconditional promises. There were no conditions attached to the promise that Jacob's 12 sons would become a multitude of nations throughout world history. These were not Jews, so we must look for Jacob's lineage, at least the nations that are descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel, elsewhere. God made these promises unconditionally to Abraham and Jacob, and God keeps his promises. It is important to note that the descendants of Abraham and Jacob, to whom these promises applied, descend from the lineage of Shem. After the flood, the earth's population descended from Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, but the multitude of nations to which the promise applied concerned Shem's descendants through Jacob's 12 sons. Ishmael and Esau were also Semites who were promised to become great nations, but the blessing applied to the descendants of Jacob's 12 sons. They were to be a blessing to all the families of the earth, God said. This is a prophecy for the last days. Who, by the way, has brought the gospel of Jesus' salvation to all nations and peoples on the earth? Is it the Jews or is it the Europeans? And who has fulfilled these characteristics? This is not an attack on the Jews. It is an impartial, factual, and objective attempt to solve one of the great mysteries of history. Ethnic regrouping. A complete account of the migrations of Israel, that is, the 10 tribes, possibly with elements of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, after the Assyrian captivity, is a vast subject, of which this video can only give an outline. The bulk of the house of Israel, i.e. the 10 tribes of Israel who lived in the northern kingdom, as well as, probably according to some authorities, a small number of Judah and Benjamin, were taken captive in the years 732 to 721 BC and resettled in Hala and by Habor, a river of Goshen, and in the cities of the Medes, as we read in 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 5 to 6. This is what we must call an ethnic regrouping, which forms the geographical starting point for further migrations westward, i.e. towards the European continent. Large parts of Europe were unpopulated wilderness at that time. The cold and inhospitable climate may have been one of the reasons why this part of the world was not very attractive to immigrants from the east. Only a little over 1,000 years had passed since the flood, and the Ice Age was still noticeable. The Greek historian Herodotus, who lived 484 to approximately 725 BC, says, for example, that the areas north of Styria, that is western Siberia, were uninhabitable due to extreme cold. The Romans counted the year 753 BC as the starting point for their calendar. This was the year when, according to tradition, Rome was founded by Romulus and Remus. Before this time, there was probably little or no population in northern Europe because of glaciers and a cold, inhospitable climate. However, in the 8th century BC, a climate change occurred on Earth that caused Europe to become warmer. The glaciers, which had branches all the way down the continent, gradually disappeared, and the foundation was laid for a population of the continent. At the same time, the Middle East, the so-called Fertile Crescent, became more dry, more hot, and less productive. Hezekiah. In the book of 2 Kings chapter 20, we find this strange and significant account, which few people have thought about more closely. King Hezekiah of Judah had become terminally ill. He prayed to the Lord, who heard his prayer and added 15 years to his life. Hezekiah asked for a sign, and God gave him the sign he wanted. We quote from the book of 2 Kings. And Hezekiah said unto Isaiah, What shall be the sign that the Lord will heal me, and that I shall go up into the house of the Lord the 3rd day? And Isaiah said, This sign shalt thou have of the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing that he hath spoken. Shall the shadow go forward 10 degrees, or go back 10 degrees? And Hezekiah answered, It is a light thing for the shadow to go down 10 degrees. Nay, but let the shadow return backward 10 degrees. And Isaiah the prophet cried unto the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backward, by which it had gone down in the dial of Ahaz. Unquote. 2 Kings chapter 20, verses 8 to 11. This happened approximately 732 BC. Astronomically, this event cannot be explained in any other way than by the Earth's axis changing. The angle of inclination relative to the plane of its orbit changed. Of course, God can do things that seem to contradict the laws of nature, but I don't think God operates that way. God could of course leave the Earth's axis unchanged. Let the sun stay in the same place in the sky, relatively naturally, since it is the rotation of the Earth that creates the illusion that the sun is moving across the sky from east to west, and instead move the shadow, which would be contrary to all laws of physics and nature. In that case, it would just be an illusion that was outside the realm of reality. I don't think God chose to do anything like that. Instead, he chose a solution that was a sign to King Hezekiah, while being permanently and serving multiple purposes. God's hand was behind all of this. He wanted to lay the foundation for the fulfillment of his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He wanted to populate a previously uninhabited part of the world with the descendants of the house of Jacob. They would become a multitude of kingdoms, and from them all the peoples of the earth would be blessed. A change in the Earth's axis would create a climate change on Earth and pave the way for the migrations of peoples westward. External catastrophic influence. There are many historical accounts that tell of an unusual celestial phenomenon in the 8th century BC. The Babylonians, who were excellent astronomers, sent messengers to King Hezekiah to ask about the strange thing that had occurred. We quote from the book of 2nd Chronicles, Howbeit in the business of the ambassadors of the princes of Babylon, who sent unto him to inquire of the wonder that was done in the land, God left him to try him, that he might know all that was in his heart. Unquote. 2nd Chronicles chapter 32, verse 31. The Chinese bamboo books tell, for example, that, quote, the stars fell like rain and the earth shook, unquote. The Hindus, the Mayans, the Egyptians, and several others also noticed an unusual celestial phenomenon in the 8th century BC. Ancient writings can tell this. It is most unfair to dismiss all these ancient accounts as mere superstition and legend. It is quite obvious that some unusual celestial phenomenon occurred at that time, and this was recorded by the sages of the time. There is also a story of a powerful earthquake in Assyria around 750 BC. In his remarkable book Worlds in Collision from 1950, Dr. Emanuel Velikovsky points out that the orbits of some of the planets of the solar system, for example Venus and Mars, have changed several times during the history of the Earth, the last time in the 8th century BC. Dr. Velikovsky believes that the Earth's axis, due to a catastrophic external influence, perhaps a close passage of Mars or Venus, changed abruptly at this time. The Earth's axis moved away from Europe and North America, with the result that the Arctic Circle moved into more temperate zones. Climate change. The change in the Earth's axis caused areas that had previously been in cold regions to experience a warmer climate. This applies to large parts of Northern Europe and North America. The Ice Age was brought to an end, and the ice sheets over Northern Europe and North America began to melt, a process that took place over several centuries. Science also agrees that a climate change on Earth brought the Ice Age to an end, although based on its evolutionary worldview, it operates with quite different time periods, tens of thousands of years, than the Bible's chronology allows for. Before climate change began in the 8th century BC, the Middle East was very fertile. It was known as the Fertile Crescent, with a land that flowed with milk and honey. There were large cedar forests and fertile soil. Cool winds from the European continent in the north brought moist air and rain to these areas. North Africa and the Sahara, which today lie as parched areas and desert, also had fertile vegetation and large lakes once in the past. Cave paintings on rock walls in the middle of the Sahara show images of hippos, wading birds, people, horses and cattle, i.e. life forms that require plenty of water. In his book, When the Sahara Was Green, researcher Henri Lot claims that the desiccation of Sahara began around 750 BC. The lakes and rivers began to dry up, with the result that vegetation and water-intensive life forms disappeared. When the vegetation disappears, the desertification process can begin. We see striking examples of this today with the large lakes drying up. The Aral Sea in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is one example. This once large lake simply disappears and it is replaced by desert. In 1981, the space shuttle Columbia photographed part of the Sahara area with ground-penetrating radar. A 50-kilometer wide belt was scanned and the images were then analyzed in special American laboratories. The images showed clear evidence that under the sands of the Sahara there had once been large lakes and rivers that had flowed through the area. This remarkable discovery was reported in Science magazine November 1982 and Time magazine December 6, 1982. However, after climate change, the once fertile areas of the Middle East began to decline. The drying up continued and Nebuchadnezzar's fertile Babylon today lies under desert sands as prophesied. The once powerful world empires in the Middle East dried up, and because the European continent now had a milder climate, the foundation was laid for the Western nations, the future world power from which a large part of the population of the United States also originates. A migration to these areas could not have occurred without a climate change that made these areas habitable and more attractive. This was God's plan. He wanted to keep his covenant with Abraham and Jacob. Their descendants were to become many nations and kingdoms of Semitic and Hebrew origin, and from them all the peoples of the earth were to be blessed. Hasn't the Western world brought the gospel of Jesus to all nations, to the so-called Gentiles? It is not the Gentiles who have brought the gospel to the West. There is strong evidence that the descendants of Jacob's 12 sons, i.e. mainly the descendants of the 10 tribes who were taken to Assyria in the 7th century before Christ, migrated further west and gave rise to the white Christian Europe. The white European race must have come from somewhere. There is also much to suggest that many Hebrews may have been both blonde and blue-eyed, in sharp contrast to conventional beliefs. There are many accounts and historical documents that suggest this. Some must be the ancestors of the white race. This has nothing to do with racism, as some would believe, but rather the establishment of a historical and ethnological and ethnographic fact that is not well presented in the usual works on these subjects. As the light shines, we are forced by the weight of the evidence to reconsider not so few of the moss-grown, accustomed ideas about many things. It is important to be open to new thoughts, new angles, and new light, even if some of it is contrary to what we have always believed.